Hello everyone, welcome to yet another sessions of the daily news analysis by SRIRAM'S IAS, where we take up the important articles featuring in the Hindu newspaper and break them down for our simplification from the examination point of view. Let's take up today's articles for discussion. The articles important in the newspaper of the Delhi edition of the Hindu newspaper features on the screen. Let's take up the articles one by one. The first article, which appears in the editorial page of the Hindu newspaper, talks about a new global standard for AI ethics. Now, this is a very important topic with relation to the artificial intelligence. We study a lot about artificial intelligence and the technologies and the opportunities and potential of it, but there is also an ethical issue of artificial intelligence, which also needs to be discussed. So therefore, this becomes important from us from the GS4 perspective, where we study ethics and the evolving dimensions of ethics in today's society. So as we know, the applications of artificial intelligence is increasing in the society. So the ethical dimensions and the ethical concerns of this emerging technology also needs to be equally considered and dealt with. And that is what the article talks about, that a global standard has been instituted to deal with this dimension of artificial intelligence ethics, and we'll try to look at that. First, so therefore, let's try to understand this article. With this, let's first understand what is artificial intelligence. When we talk about artificial intelligence, what does that mean? It means that it is a computer or a machine which is able to perform certain functions when by feeding of certain information, and it is able to automate those functions and perform a lot other functions based on that information. So we put some input into the machine, it processes that input and performs a function much complicated than what a human mind or this thing could have done. So this is the concept of artificial intelligence, wherein the computing ability of the machine is quite enhanced, which enables this artificial intelligence to perform quite high intensity functions, crunch a lot of data, process a lot of data, and therefore enable a host of services possible for the for humans in general. So that is why this is the concept of AI. Now, what discrimination or what challenges are we talking about in artificial intelligence, which the authors want to start with? First of all, when we talk about AI or applications of AI in anything, let's say in the facial recognition system, there are various facial recognition systems all over the world which runs on artificial intelligence, which means that when the system was made, a lot of images were put as input to the system, and that's how the computer tried to analyze all the faces, and with respect to that, now with facial recognition system, it identifies faces, right? So this is the concept through which the facial recognition systems were built. The authors say that the kind of inequalities which exist in the society, they will get reflected in the artificial intelligence dimension as well. If inequalities exist in the real world, such as those preparing the systems of these facial recognition systems are predominantly in the developed countries, or what we can say are people in the white countries. Similarly, people who are developing this system, the percentage of women while developing these systems will be very less. So these kind of inequalities get reflected in the performance of these AI systems, wherein it was seen that this particular facial recognition systems, the ease and efficiency with which it identified the white faces, it did not do so with respect to the dark skinned faces. So that is why we can see that the use of AI, wherein it can also be quite momentous in terms of its revolutionary uses, it can also exacerbate or increase the amount of inequalities that exist. So this kind of discrimination in the facial recognition system was faced, which the authors point out, through which they try to reflect that if not taken care of these dimensions, the AI will increase these inequalities. So similarly with the case of women as well, the faces with respect to especially dark skinned women were not identified that easily. This is because the number of and the amount of inputs fed into this system would have been disproportionate. So that is why there is a need to deal with this AI systems ethically and from all dimensions. So with respect to that, the authors point out that India's efforts have been laudable, where India's efforts on this front has been incorporated in the National Strategy on AI, which has been released by the Niti Aayog. Now this is a national plan which the Niti Aayog released dealing with the applications of AI, wherein it wants to augment the technology of artificial intelligence into various fields such as health, education, medical sector, to so that the benefit of artificial intelligence reaches to every citizen, and it ultimately benefits human society. And its approach, that of AI for all, is being lauded by the authors, wherein the strategy also talks about the inclusivity, keeping the AI inclusive in nature, wherein it should not just benefit one class of people but all categories of people. So this is India's efforts in this direction, which the authors point out are commendable. Now the authors come to the important standard, which is the crux of the article, that there should be discussion on the ethical dimension, and what concrete step has been taken to deal with this issue is that of the recommendation on ethics of artificial intelligence. This is a set of recommendations prepared by which organization? Prepared by the UNESCO. It's not mentioned here. UNESCO, United Nations for Educational and Socio-Cultural Organization. So this is a UN organization which deals with educational and other social issues. So this UN organization, in the span of 2 years of intense deliberation and discussion, has come out with this document of recommendation on the ethics of artificial intelligence, which sets out common values and principles so that each country can follow them to assist in the creation of the legal infrastructure that is required to ensure the healthy development of AI. So does this organization set laws themselves? No, they are setting values and principles which the member states who are part of UNESCO should follow while making the laws for their country. So that is how now the member states, whoever is making a law with respect to AI in their country, will have a guidepost as this recommendation on the ethics of AI. So what does this do? The recommendation has 3 main parts. One is based on values, as to which values should be pertaining, such as inclusivity, non-discrimination, then principles, and then strategic areas. So based on these 3 main parts, what are the main contents of the recommendation of these of this document? So they make noteworthy recommendations with respect to the usage of AI. The first one being that the problem that we discussed, the solution for that is use affirmative action to provide representation. What do we mean by affirmative action? When we talked about the inequality existing in terms of working in the AI ecosystem and for the machines, to which the policy says, or the document says, that with respect to these structures, there should be affirmative action or reservation of all kinds of people, such as the tribal people, women, and all other categories should be adequately represented while the making of these systems, so that their issues also get reflected and are also identified in those AI systems. So first suggestion or recommendation that the document does for the member states is that the affirmative action or the policy of reservation of some kind should be used to provide adequate representation of all types of people. Then second recommendation which it makes is that there should be proper management of data, and its privacy should be protected, and access to information should be also taken care of. Now obviously, whenever we talk about the flow of information and data, it should be properly managed, which means that whatever is the personal data or sensible data, that should be taken care of much more critically, and the storage of data should also be taken care of. So, and then the issue of privacy wherein anyone wants to delete their information, that should be facilitated. This is also coming under access to information, which means that adequate amount of information and the correct information also should be accessible to people. So this will again make for an inclusive as well as transparent and sort of correct flow of information. So this is the second recommendation. The third recommendation which the document does is that the AI should not be used for social scoring and mass surveillance. Now this is a major problem that is also being reflected in countries all around the world, wherein the disruptive use of AI is being also done by certain factions for mass surveillance, such as the Pegasus software that we saw and other such events, wherein the use of such technologies is being done to the detriment of the larger common mass of people. So the document says that it should not be done for social scoring, which means that using this data for furthering any immoral means with respect to the society, and mass surveillance should not be done. Then the fourth recommendation which the document does is that particular attention must be paid to impact on children. We know that children and young people are increasingly on the internet and all of these sites, and therefore particular attention while framing policies with respect to the AI technologies must be paid with respect to the impact on children and such young people. Then the fifth recommendation which the document makes is that the member states should invest and promote not only digital media and literacy skills, which are an important part while developing the AI systems, but they should also invest and promote socio-emotional and AI ethics skills, right? This is extremely important. Those engineers, those developers who are making this system, who have the technical knowledge of forming these systems, should also be equally equipped with the socio-emotional skills and the ethics of AI, so that while forming the systems, they are aware of all the dimensions, and that is when they will be incorporating it into those systems. So that is a major recommendation which the body makes. So these are the major recommendations which the authors have highlighted from the recommendation on ethics of artificial intelligence. This becomes an important point wherever we find a question on ethics on AI. This international global standard document can definitely cite it with its recommendations for use. Right? With this, let's move on to our next article for the day. The next article which appears in the newspaper talks about a wish list for reform in India's higher judiciary. Now, the Indian judiciary, we always keep talking about it. The opportunities and reforms in Indian judiciary are also a point of discussion quite often. In this case, so first of all, so SRIRAM Panchu is a celebrated lawyer and also a lawyer in also a celebrated mediator. So he has come up with certain suggestions for reform in the judiciary. In the backdrop of that, there is a certain rumor going on that the retirement age for the Supreme Court judges can be extended. On this backdrop, he comes up with his suggestions for reforming the judiciary. Let's look at his suggestion, what he wants to say about what can be done or what steps can be done to reform the judiciary. So let's take a look at the reform suggested by the authors. The first reform he talks about is about the retirement age, since that is the context going on. So he points out that the retirement age for the High Court judges is 62 years and for the Supreme Court judges it is 65 years, and he questions this as to why the difference as such. Are the High Court judges any less competent in their mind and matter after 62 and they cannot perform after that? Therefore, he calls for the similarity of retirement ages between both judges. So this is the first reform that he suggests, right? I hope this is clear. The second reform that he suggests is that he talks that after retirement, we know a lot of Supreme Court judges, after they have demitted the office, they move into a lot of other opportunities. So a lot of Supreme Court judges participate in arbitrations where they are appointed as arbitrators, and they also get appointed in other constitutional posts, tribunals and commissions. So all of these opportunities are present for the Supreme Court judges after their retirement. But what happens is that a lot of the Supreme Court judges indulge in activities such as participating in arbitration, which becomes primarily a money-making activity, and the aspect of public service, of using their knowledge for the service of the public, is not really fulfilled. So the author suggests that a public service cadre should be made, and also we know that with these appointments as well, a lot of favoritism aspects can also be seen. So to combat that, the author suggests that this public service cadre can be created, and from this pool of retired judges, where all of these judges would register for this cadre, from this pool appointments for all these constitutional tribunals and commission posts can be made from this cadre. This is his suggestion to streamline the process of after retirement job process for the Supreme Court judges, wherein this is done to iron out the flaws of favoritism as well as money making and not serving the public attitude of the some of the Supreme Court judges that is visible in the news. So this is his second reform suggestion. The third suggestion that he gives is that generally the senior most judge becomes the Chief Justice of India. This is a practice we are aware of, wherein whoever is the senior most judge of the Supreme Court, he becomes the Chief Justice of India. The author points out that he does not understand why this is being done, because the Constitution does not mention this. So this also becomes an important point from a prelims exam perspective, wherein a question can be asked that the post of CJI being the senior most judge of the Supreme Court is a point mentioned under the Constitution. So we should remember that this is not mentioned in the Constitution. What is mentioned in the Constitution is only that Article 124 only says that President will appoint every judge of the Supreme Court, including the CJI. So there is no requirement for that judge being the senior most judge of the Supreme Court. So first of all, the author points out to this fallacy, that why is this being done? Why is only the senior most judge being allowed to become the CJI? This requirement actually was done by the Supreme Court in the second judge's case, which is a series of cases wherein the Supreme Court decided the process of appointment of judges to the court. So in this case, the concept of seniority was incorporated by the Supreme Court, which the author points out is the usurpation of the government's of the legislature's power, because and the government's power, because the president was supposed to appoint the judge, and by adding such a requirement, it is not a good point done by the Supreme Court. So what he suggests is that this post concept of seniority can be removed, because this creates bias in the minds because of the impending rule. Now what happens is that, let's say if a judge, he knows that after a point it's going to be his turn, his or her turn to be the CJI. Now due to that, there can be a lot of dangers of that particular judge aligning to the views of the current dispensation government, and that is why a lot of biases can creep in, which can affect the functioning of this judge, which is why the author points out for the removal of such concept of seniority. Then coming to, if this concept is removed, how to choose the Chief Justice of India, then he points out that that judge with the best track record, who has proven himself or herself worthy in both judicial as well as administrative qualities, should be appointed as the CJI, and not only the senior most judge should be taken into consideration. In this way, both quality as well as merit can be assured on that post. And he also says that they should have a fixed 3-year term. Currently what happens is that whoever becomes the Chief Justice, how much ever years until the retirement is remaining, that is the time period for that Chief Justice. He bats for a fixed 3-year term for the Chief Justice. So these are the major reforms that the author is suggesting with respect to the higher judiciary and the appointment of judges in the Supreme Court, right? This we can take note of. With this, let's move on to the next article for the day. The next article, which appears in the newspaper, talks about the absurdity of the anti-defection law. Now, why has this article come into the picture is because most of you all must be reading the fiasco going on in Maharashtra, wherein a lot of MLAs who were part of the ruling government are now wanting to or are in the process. No one knows what is going to happen next, but are in the process. Rumors are being talked about, wherein the 30 MLAs from the ruling party have gone incommunicado, which means that they are campaigning. They are being stationed in Surat, and talks are going on to topple the government. So in this case, the aspect of defection of MPs and MLAs from the political party or from the government is again coming into the discussion forum. That is why the efficacy of anti-defection law, the discussion on this gains importance. This becomes important for us from the GS2 point of view, and questions of defection have been already visible in the UPSC mains examination. So we'll have a discussion on anti-defection law. But first, what is anti-defection law? What do we mean by anti-defection law? First of all, this whenever a problem occurs in the political party wherein a MLA or MP of that political party leaves out the political party to join some other party, this destabilizes the political party and the government, and in order to stop this, the law of anti-defection was brought in under the 10th schedule of the constitution to deal with the transfer of such candidates from party and to maintain the stability of the government and the system. So this law mentions certain grounds for disqualification of a member, wherein if he performs certain functions or certain acts, he will be disqualified from the party as well as from his post. So the grounds of disqualification under the 10th schedule law is that if an elected member voluntarily gives up his membership of a political party, so this becomes the first ground of disqualification, wherein he can voluntarily give up the membership of a political party. That becomes the first ground. The second ground is that if he votes or abstains from voting in such house contrary to any direction issued by his political party or anyone authorized to do so without obtaining prior permission. Now this becomes an important ground for disqualification. What is it trying to say? It is trying to say that this provision was brought in order to maintain the stability in the political party. Therefore, it tries to say that if any member votes in the legislature house, be that the state assembly or the parliament, if that elected member votes against the wishes of the political party, which means that there is a this means that he votes against the wishes of the party or against the party whip's direction. There is a party whip in the legislature who gives directions to other members, and they have to follow the directions. And if at all this member does not vote or abstains from voting contrary to any direction issued by his political party, then he stands the ground of disqualification. This ground of disqualification has now become a major point of contention and issue, which we'll be discussing shortly. So as a precondition for his disqualification, his abstention from voting should not be condoned by his party or the authorized person within 15 days of such incident. This is a added point that is added to the ground of disqualification on based of abstaining from voting. The third ground is that if any independently elected member joins any political party. So let's say that a person has won the election contesting from an independent seat, which means that while fighting the election, he did not join any political party. But after winning, he instantly joins any political party. He will stand a chance to get disqualified from that post. So that becomes third ground. The fourth ground is that if any nominated member joins any political party after the expiry of 6 months. So we know that certain members in the legislatures are nominated by the governor and president in their respective houses. Now these nominated members, if they join any political party after the expiry of 6 months from their election, from their appointment to the post, then they stand a chance for disqualification of their post. These are the grounds of disqualification for the defection of these elected members from their political parties. But has this worked? Has this law worked? Is it showing any challenges? Because if we are seeing this fiasco where 30 MLAs of a party are going on in some other state and wanting to plot against the government and topple the government, can we see that there are cracks in these laws? So let's look at the author's issues which he points out that are with the anti-defection law. First of all, which we saw as the ground for disqualification, where the elected member was not allowed to vote or abstain from voting against the party wishes, which means that he or she is not free to express his or her own personal opinion into that legislature. So that is why this creates hindrance into the freedom of expression of that MP and MLA. And is this not against representative democracy? Because this MP or MLA got elected from a particular constituency, which means that he or she is representing and fighting for the rights and views of that particular constituency and not the party per se. That is why when his or her ability to voice his or her opinion in the house is curtailed, it is a blow towards representative democracy. So this becomes the first flawed point with respect to the anti-defection law, which it has shown cracks in, and that is why it has not been effective in controlling the menace of defection. The second is that the anti-defection law turns the concept of representative on its head, like we were saying. It makes the MP neither a delegate of the constituency nor a national legislature, but converts them into just an agent of the party, right? So neither are they able to represent their constituency and neither are they able to perform the function of the legislator well. Why? Because they are supposed to be there to deliberate on the policies, and deliberation might mean disagreement with their own party sometimes, but again that is not being, the space for that is not kept. This is what this is doing, hollowing out the legislatures. If this crucial function the MPs and MLAs would not be able to do, would this not degrade the quality of the legislatures? That is why the quality of discussion and debates in the legislature, we see that the quality is decreasing. This becomes a major factor, because if there is no freedom, there is no incentive for that elected member to put in effort and to understand the policy, because if he or she knows that he or she only has to toe the line set by his or her party, then there is no incentive for him or her to put an effort to understand the policy, and therefore core role of examining and deciding policy, bills and budgets is sidelined. The role of national legislature is undermined. This becomes again a major issue with respect to anti-defection law. And then it also weakens the accountability mechanism. How does this weaken the accountability mechanism? The founding fathers of our constitution instituted a parliamentary democracy in our country. What does this mean? That the parliamentary democracy, as opposed to presidential democracy or the presidential form of government, does not provide much stability, because the toppling of the government and shifting of the government is a chance, but it provides accountability, wherein the government, which is chosen from the legislature as well, it is accountable to the representatives of the constituency, which means that it ensures accountability much more. But when the member or elected member who is representing his or her constituency is not able to defend the rights and views of the constituency well only, it means that the accountability factor of that particular house is not able to maintain. And that is why it weakens the accountability mechanism, which forms a major setback for the defection law. And if it does not ensure accountability or is a hindrance to accountability, the point for which defection law was brought, that is stabilizing the government and the party, it does not even promise the stability, because as we are seeing, the defection law provides for defection of one particular elected member. But if these elected members go out of the party in a bulk manner, that is 2/3 of these members go, then the defection law says that that won't be a ground for disqualification. That is why we see majority of the MLAs, when they shift from the parties, then the law of disqualification through this anti-defection law is not applied on them, and that becomes a problem. So this system currently is not even ensuring the stability of the political party and government, because the system has found way to topple governments even with this. And the other issue which the author points out is that of the delay of speaker in taking a decision. So with respect to the grounds of disqualification that we saw, the decision on the disqualification of a member is to be taken by the speaker of the party. But generally, the speaker being the member from the ruling party, it is seen that he or she takes a lot of delay in making these decisions. The Supreme Court, in order to combat this, has put a deadline of 3 months, wherein it says that within 3 months the speaker has to take decisions on the disqualification of the member. But it is not clear as to what happens when he does not do so. So that is again an ambiguity. As a consequence of all of these, what is happening is that degrading legislatures, as we saw, the quality of legislature and legislating in the highest body of legislatures such as state assembly and parliament, that is degrading, and it is turning them into only a fora to endorse the decision of the government on bills and budget, rather than being a body on deliberating on the policies and keeping the government accountable. It is only making that body a fora to only come and endorse the decisions of the government, which is an alarming sign. So that is why there are a lot of issues with anti-defection law which needs to be taken care of and need to be amended. So this was the discussion on anti-defection law, primarily with respect to the issues of this law, right? With this, we come to today's end of today's discussion. We will meet tomorrow again with the important articles for the day. Thank you.